Hello everyone and welcome to EMA's Health and Safety Podcast. My name is Kevin Chambers and I'm really pleased that you could join us today. New Zealand likes to think of itself as being a country that prides itself on taking care of its people, but our health and safety statistics tell a slightly harder story. None more so than when the Pike River Mine exploded on the 19th of November 2010. On that day, 29 men lost their lives. 2 people managed to get to safety. I'm very pleased today to have with me the father of 2 of the men that were involved in the mine. One of them unfortunately passed away, and the other one was one of the people that made it to safety. Neville, welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Really appreciate it. Neville, you're a health and safety professional, have been for some 35 years. You've got a master's degree in occupational health and safety. You were telling me that at that time you were the first person in New Zealand that had that. Obviously, on the day of the disaster at Pike River, you were the health and safety manager there. And as we've discussed previously, you lost your son Ben, and Daniel was one of the people that made it out. So
rescuing Russell Smith.
That's right. He rescued Russell Smith on the way out. Yeah. Look, today what we wanted to talk about was not so much what happened at Pike River, but more sort of what's happened since then. Obviously, there was a royal inquiry. The new Health and Safety at Work Act was put in place in 2015. We have, I believe, and hopefully you would agree, we've made some progress in New Zealand, but we've still got a way to go.
It's a continuing journey, and it will always be a continuing journey with new innovations, new technology, new ways of doing things. And it really comes back to leadership.
Yes.
It's top, but also getting people involved at the bottom, and then trying to meet in the middle. If you're going to serve on a board, that's fine, but you also need to learn and be part of that industry and come to terms with what happens on the ground.
Right.
And
so
get
a
involved.
board member, they're there for their expertise and executive leadership. But your suggestion, your advice would be they also have a responsibility to learn about the industry, learn about the business that they're a board member of, so that they can also be made aware of the critical risks and how they're being managed.
Instead of going to the people you're supposed to, who have been sort of know the question that's going to be asked, and have got an answer to it, I'd go to the people that sort of fade into the background. And to me, if they don't have the knowledge or the skills or the information, then it's a training, like a training needs analysis. You're identifying a gap in knowledge, a gap in skills, perhaps, and it's something that it's data. It's another data point that you can add to continuously improve. But if you want to continuously improve, you've got to build trust first.
Yes. So let's talk about training a little bit later. I think the trust is really important, and let's, if it's okay, let's bring in kind of safety culture with that. So safety culture is a very important part of making sure a workplace is safe. You talked just now about trust. What does that look like then, with the senior leaders trusting the workers, but the workers also trusting the senior leaders to make good decisions?
Well, I think we still have a issue around blame. It's too simple to blame individuals for something going wrong, whereas we need to be encouraging. And if you want to build trust, you should have some sort of program where you acknowledge the employees for doing things that are right, instead of there with a big stick to bang them over the head for doing something wrong.
And in this case, doing things that are right would be, ceasing unsafe work, calling out a practice that maybe is no longer fit for purpose, and not being worried about calling it out.
And even if you're the safety professional on the senior leadership team, you've got to be the consciousness of that business, of that organisation.
Yep.
If during the conversations and discussions in the senior managers meetings, that sort of occur, someone comes up with some harebrained idea, you've got to say, oh, hold on.
Yep.
And you have to have the courage
Yep.
and the fortitude to stand your ground and, back that up with objective evidence and data.
Yep.
Or at least say, look, I don't really agree with that. That sounds, quite hazardous.
Yep.
We'd have to do some risk assessments
Yep.
on that, change the management plans, say something.
Yep.
See something, say something.
Yep. So
and have the courage to do that.
Yeah, and I like the fact that A, you've mentioned courage, but B, also you've talked about, to be the consciousness. Health and safety as a profession is still relatively young. And while there is a lot of emphasis on technical expertise, I'm wondering, are we doing enough with regard to ensuring that our health and safety leaders have the communication skills, like you mentioned, the courage, the fortitude to say, look, hang on, let's stop and think about this. What are your thoughts regarding that?
Yeah, so professional bodies such as New Zealand Institute of Safety Management
Yep.
Is a good start in terms of that. Like in Australia, when I worked in Australia, and you'd look at the adverts for job adverts, and if you weren't a member of a professional association,
Yep.
it actually said, "Do not apply for this
Right.
role." It was a prerequisite of employment.
Yep.
Because it signifies that you've been vetted externally by professionals, and when as national operations manager and the vice president of INCHPO,
Yep.
the international global.
Yes, which you were, I think, for some years.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And PJ, and he was the New Zealand manager, and I was the national manager.
Just for our viewers, many of whom will know PJ, but some won't. PJ is Paul Jarvie. He also works for EMA, and Paul and Neville go back some 30 years.
Yeah.
Let's talk again about this culture. So nobody goes to work wanting to get hurt, and I would argue no employer wants their staff to get hurt either, right?
No, exactly.
I mean that just doesn't make any sense. So what is it that board members and senior leaders would need to value to ensure that safety does remain paramount?
Well, they can get great advice from EMA.
Well done, Neville. Yes.
But also, look, everyone's got a safety management system.
Yep.
Okay. But few have fully implemented it.
Okay.
And probably looking back with on the issue of Pike was I used to, because we're such a remote site.
Yeah.
And it was 24/7. You associate with the same people over and over and over again. And I had an attitude of trust but verify. So if you were a colleague, another manager, a departmental manager, and you're telling me something, then I'd trust that. Okay,
Yep.
but I'd verify it perhaps by audit. But then the next step to that is evidential.
Yep.
Data, that you're testing that these things are working. And you can only do that. You can't do that sitting at a desk behind.
No.
You've got to be where the rubber hits the road, out in the front end.
Right.
And so too do the directors.
Yep.
They have to see what's going on and understand it. And we irrespective of our age and our backgrounds and qualifications, we're always learning something new.
Yep.
Technologically, 120 years ago, couldn't fly. Now we're sending these big Starship things, Elon Musk, into into the heavens,
Yes, we are.
Just incredible.
And so the technology then also changes the work conditions. A job will take mining. So, mining 100 years ago, mining today, very different.
Canaries, If the canary dies, get out.
Right, and quite different now. I like what you said there about, the leaders also need to see it, trust but verify.
Yeah, and have some data, some objective evidence. And a lot of people ask me, well, how do you know what safe looks like?
Yes, it's a good question.
Yeah, and I said, well, reach out to someone else in your industry. I know even your competitors, when it comes to health and safety and keeping people safe, they are prepared to share information.
There should be no secrets, right? It's like, it's like all about keeping people safe.
And that's paramount. No one wakes up in the morning and says, oh, today's a great day to die.
No.
It doesn't work like that. So, get out there and do the hard yards and see what's going on, see where things can be improved, and then come up with an implementation plan on how to improve it, and then go back and check that it's operating, but also gather information from the workers doing it, and to this, where it needs to be tweaked up. Because you can't create a safety culture sitting behind a desk.
No, and you mentioned something prior to us speaking in the podcast today, around, if you're not measuring it, you're not managing it. I think Peter Drucker maybe said that many years ago, and that's why the data is so important, yeah?
Yes, exactly.
Yep. Lagging or leading, do you have a preference?
Well, I'm always like leading. Look, the lagging is what we've done, and it's very good at audit time when you get external third parties to come in and do the audits. You can provide objective evidence on what you've done and how you've done it, but leading is indicators as well of what you intend to do, how you're going to do that, how you're going to communicate it, because everyone in the workplace, irrespective of whatever industry you come from, need to be held accountable. There are consequences for the things that we do, and at that senior management level, it needs to be built into your employment contract.
Like preps and KPIs and stuff like that.
Key performance indicators. DuPont was a case study that we did at university, and the reason that there's not a whole lot of holes in the ground is that if there was a fire that was just a couple of millimeters, and they'd treat that exactly the same way they would a full building or tank that was on fire. And the consequence or the accountability is if they didn't do that, then they were gone.
Right.
They're out. And that's why DuPont, who create a large portion of the world's explosives, there's not a whole lot of holes in the ground where they've got factories.
Right. So they make people accountable.
Yes.
Yes.
And you should be accountable.
And they've got, in doing so, they've got strong policies,
and they've
procedures.
built a very strong culture where it's a no-blame culture, where people are not penalised or sort of outcast, outcast by putting their hands up and saying, this is not right. I don't like this. They should have the ability to stop work. If something is not right, don't do it. And from a safety professional's perspective, who does the report writing and collects the data and then does the presentations, I would rather work stop for 15 or 20 minutes and get an issue sorted out then than we go on. There's an incident, an accident, and then I've got to do a full incident investigation, and then that's got to go to Australia to head office or wherever in the world or whatever. So getting people and that sort of mindset is critical to improving safety culture in every business.
And as unfortunately you well know, an incident, an accident, serious harm happens at work. It doesn't just affect that worker. It affects their family. It affects their communities.
Oh and Pike devastated my family. My father died 3 hours after the explosion, and so I'd been there since 5:30 in the morning. I would always go up to the control room, pick up all the paperwork for all the reports, and then there was a production meeting every morning at 7 a.m.
Which is good practice, right?
Oh yeah. And it was concentrated more on what's happened in the last 24 hours and what's going to happen in the next 24 hours. And I'd collect all that information, drop it into the lamp house, and the under managers, they'd often be doing a change of shift crossover, see if there's any sort of late entries. And on the day of the explosion, I was quite blessed in that I was walking. I'd been to the under manager, came out of the under manager's office, picked up further paperwork for all departments, and I was taking it back down ready for the production meeting at 7 a.m. And I hear a voice in the background, Dad. And I turned around, and it was my son Ben. And whereas Daniel calls me Neville.
Daniel calls you Neville.
And I irritate. He knows it irritates me.
Maybe that's why he does it.
That's exactly why he does it. Yes. And Ben...
You saw Ben, right?
Yeah, I saw Ben, and he says, look, I know how anal you are with paperwork, so here... And I said, what's this, son? And he says, last night I had yesterday I had a first aid treatment, and I uneven surfaces, had tripped over and grazed my arm. And I said, oh, show me. And I said, shall we go to the first aid room? We'll put some betadine, some antiseptic on that, because it's quite humid underground and noisy and all that sort of stuff. And he said, no. He said, stop fussing around. You're always fussing around. I said, okay. And by this time, the drift runner that holds about 14 miners was tooting its horn, waiting for him to get on board. He said, I've got to go. And I said, right, okay, I'll take this down to the meeting. I love you, boy. And he sort of, as he was walking around, turned around and he said, yeah, I love you too, Dad. And those were the last words I spoke to him. Wow. I had no idea that he was going to be gone. Later that day. Wow. So I was blessed to have that moment.
It's the last thing you said to your son, and you heard from your son.
And I'd encourage people, I think of the others that perhaps the night before they may have had an argument with their wife or children or something like that. So I'd encourage everyone out there that, never go to bed angry. No. Tell the people you love them, because it's about family. It's safety's about family. It's about keeping everyone whole. Okay, you shouldn't go to work and get things chopped off or get killed at work.
We definitely agree on that. There's no question. And again, I really, really appreciate.
But we're really good at doing that.
Unfortunately, we're better than other countries are.
Australia and England especially. Yeah.
Can we then, and look, thank you so much for sharing that story. I hadn't been aware of that.
Not many are.
No, wow. Look, can we, I'd like to wind things up by saying, okay, or at least giving you an opportunity to say, all right, so look, we know, New Zealand knows it's not doing as well as it should be. Okay, that's well understood. But we're better than we were. And we have talked about some of the ways that things have improved. You mentioned earlier, it's a continuous journey. You're always learning. It doesn't actually stop.
No, never stops.
What would your advice then be, or what could be the next step for New Zealand, because I think there's a willingness to do better. There's a willingness to keep,
I'd agree.
to keep the progress. Fewer and fewer incidents, fewer and fewer situations of serious harm or sadly death. Could you just finish up with a couple of final insights about next steps for us as a country?
Look, it starts from the top.
Yep.
Okay, so it starts at board level.
Yep.
And accountability. And they set the theme of the operation, whatever industry that may be in. So it's their involvement. And if they don't know stuff, that's fine. We've got to learn. Get out there and learn about it. Go on your walks, but don't have a pre-arranged, pre-orchestrated sort of thing just to tick a box. It's not about ticking boxes.
Right.
But at the same time, getting a groundswell of support at the bottom of the organisation and getting some health and safety champions who are actually willing to make it conducive to it's okay to put your hand up and say, this is not right. That machine doesn't work properly.
Yep.
This needs to be fixed.
Yep.
These sorts of things. Go, and celebrate your successes.
Yep.
And build on that. And that top-down, bottom-up approach where we meet somewhere in the middle, you're going to have a pretty robust safety culture by the time you get there. But, it is a journey.
Yep.
It is ongoing. Technology's changing all the time. There's faster, better, safer ways of doing things than what we did just last century, in comparison.
Yep.
I would encourage everyone out there to actually get more involved, because it's safety is about people, and people are paramount, especially if you love them.
Thank you. Beautiful words to finish on. Thank you so much for joining us today, Neville. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking the time to watch this podcast. It's an EMA Health and Safety podcast. My name was Kevin Chambers. Wow. Great conversation. As Neville said, it's about the people. Look after yourselves out there. Stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you the next time. Bye-bye.